In May, a fresh batch of NCDU recruits arrived in Maui. Per the direction of Kohler and Kaufman, the men were told to abandon the bulk of their gear, their green fatigues, their boots, their Mae West life jackets, even their helmets and sidearms, and slip into a pair of black Maui swim trunks and dive masks, their rough rubber edges sanded down to prevent them from biting into their face. What followed were 9 seemingly endless days of training on how to systematically map an underwater landscape and blow it up. Rocks, coral, night swimming, blast, no rest, no sleep, suicide stuff, one trainee remembered. For no fewer than 6 hours a day, recruits lived in the water, perfecting their strokes until they could swim a mile before breakfast. Their only day off was Monday, when possible. Seeing that this was the first time many of them had handled explosive fused or tied primer cord into a trunk line, accidents were routine. Fingers blown clear off or hanging by bloody shreds of skin. Asked how long he could swim underwater with 100 pounds of powder, recruit Knorik replied, "With 100 pounds of powder, I could probably stay under forever." So this is, I highlighted that part because this is a point now where we're starting to see, the idea of the naked warrior. They're getting rid of all their gear. They're just wearing trunks. Saipan is where we get this recon, like a legit recon going on. The closer his swimmers got to the beach, the more nervous Kaufman became. At 100 yards, he tried to turn them around, but most of them kept going. At 50 yards, some began to pivot back, but some didn't. Closing to within 30 yards of the shore and 40 yards of the guns, so close that they ceased swimming and dug their toes of their sneakers into the sand, pulling themselves along with their gloved hands. When that last line finally did run out of water, each man backed off slightly, turned left, then side-stroked along the beach for 25 yards, edging his mask out of the water with every breath, careful to remember the locations of any gun positions under circumstances not an easy thing to forget. On the swim back, each man ignored his exhaustion and worsening leg cramps and stayed as close as possible to the bottom. When they neared the reef, Kaufman reboarded his mattress and offered a nearby swimmer a tow. Get that damn thing out of here. This is you go over this earlier. All the little rafts that they had were getting shot up. On the other side of the now surf-slammed reef, each swimmer waited for pickup. When the landing craft arrived, the coxswains took turns motoring each man and either dropped them a Jacob's ladder or reversed engines until he could grab hold and pull himself up. Throughout this cumbersome boarding, a period packed with vociferous cursing, said one survivor, every man aboard fully expected a mortar round to drop square into the boat. As soon as the last man was loaded, Kaufman tallied his numbers and realized that, in addition to the officer killed on the air mattress, 2 of his swimmers were still missing. Pulled in separate directions by his instinct to rescue and his orders to rush back to the fleet, Kaufman looked around at his blue-tinged, black-striped men and chose the more painful option. With the fleet waiting for his information, Kaufman ordered his boats back to the APDs. When the men of UDT-7 arrived back at the Humphreys, they discovered something remarkable. Though several men had been wounded, some with serious internal injuries from the mortar blast, not a single one of their swimmers had been lost. In fact, the only men that had been killed had been the ones who had remained on the LCPRs as they had waited for swimmers to return. Kaufman's UDT-5 swimmers had been slightly less fortunate, with 1 killed, several more wounded, and 2 still missing, but it was nothing compared to the bloodbath that occurred just 1 week before at Normandy. So this is another methodology of executing these things,
and it's sort of a metaphor for what actually happened, the entire history. So the Navy intentionally creates all of these units. They create NCDUs, they create the UDTs, they create the Scouts and Raiders. All of these units are created for a specific purpose. They're committed to action for a specific reason. But once the Navy creates these things, the Navy can't necessarily predict how far the individuals that belong to these institutions are going to push them. They're going to push those envelopes. So Kaufman, when he's driving his men toward the beach or he's pushing his men to swim, he also is trying to stop them. He's trying to stop them 50 yards from shore. They won't. They keep going 25 yards. So the SEAL teams are created by the Navy. They're created by the Navy for the Navy. But you can sort of see it just in that moment. The SEAL teams become so much more because of the SEALs themselves. So the SEALs don't create it. We don't. We're not responsible for our own institutions. We think we are, but we're not. But we are responsible for what that institution ultimately became.
Yeah, there's an interesting tie-in that you make in the book, and I don't remember if it's in my notes to cover, so I'll just mention it now. The Navy the Navy, just by nature of being disaggregated and being spread apart, especially back in the day, there was decentralized command, unlike any other organization.
Absolutely.
And that spirit of decentralized command of like, hey, you go and you take the fight to the enemy. You get in this ship or you get in this submarine, you go overseas and you take the fight to the enemy.
You have mission type orders.
Right. And that's the way the Navy had to exist back in the day. And that vein and that DNA remains. And that's why you get these guys that are very proactive and will be default aggressive out there on the battlefield.
That's exactly right. Default aggressive. Latitude only works if your default orientation or default setting is aggression. And if you read any like naval history book during the Napoleonic Wars, or if you read the Patrick O'Brien Master and Commander series, like you're never connected to your chain of command, whereas the Army always is.
Always is. Yeah.
So that as technology has improved or as technology has gotten better to connect commanders to their troops in the field, that chain of command has only thickened. Whereas in the Navy, I mean, we have all of this history behind us, or the Navy has all of this history behind it, of latitude, of mission-type orders, of relying on the aggressiveness of the individual commander. You just have to trust your guys. Mm-hmm. But you have to be specific about what you want.
Oh, for sure.
So
otherwise, you get rogue.
Exactly.